I'm 19M, currently a college student. My relationship with my family has always been a bit strained, mainly because of how different I am from the rest of them. I've worked hard to achieve what I have, maintaining good grades and even securing a scholarship for college. I thought my efforts would finally earn me some respect, but that wasn't the case. My parents have always favored my sister. She's spoiled, entitled, and used to getting her way. It's been clear to me for a long time that they see her as the golden child, while I'm just the responsible one who's expected to handle things on my own. Every time she screws up, I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces or make sacrifices for her. Over the years, I managed to save up $30,000 for college. This wasn't easy. I earned most of it through part-time jobs and scholarships. This money means everything to me. It's my ticket to a future where I'm not dependent on anyone. But to my parents, it was apparently just another resource to exploit when my sister was short on cash. My sister, Sarah, is 24, but you wouldn't know it by the way she acts. She's been coddled her entire life, always getting whatever she wants without lifting a finger. Right now, she's unemployed and has been for a while. She claims she's figuring things out, but really, she just spends her time lounging around, doing nothing. Despite this, she's decided that she needs a new apartment, something fancy, in a nice part of town. Of course, she has no savings or income to afford it. One evening, my parents sat me down and told me that Sarah had found the perfect place but was short on money for the deposit. They demanded that I hand over my entire college savings, $30,000, to help her secure the apartment. I was floored. They didn't ask, they demanded. And then came the kicker. If I refused, they said I could pack my things and leave. They made it clear that my future was less important to them than making sure Sarah was comfortable. They didn't stop there. My mom pulled the whole family comes first card, and my dad said something about how Sarah had always been there for me, which is a complete lie. They tried to guilt me, saying that if I was a good brother, I'd do this without hesitation. The emotional manipulation was strong. At first, I couldn't even speak. I was in shock, completely blindsided by their demand. I asked them how they could possibly think it was fair to take everything I'd worked for and give it to Sarah, who hadn't lifted a finger to help herself. My dad just shrugged and said it was about keeping the family together. My mom said something about how Sarah needed this apartment more than I needed my savings. That's when it hit me. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. They didn't care about what was fair. They only cared about Sarah. Over the next few days, I was a mess, constantly weighing my options. I thought about just giving in to avoid being kicked out. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how wrong that was. Why should I have to sacrifice everything I'd worked for just because my sister couldn't be bothered to take care of herself? But on the other hand, standing my ground meant risking everything. I didn't have anywhere to go if they kicked me out. I was on my own. I even considered reaching out to some extended family members, but I knew it wouldn't help. Most of them were just as taken in by Sarah's act as my parents were. I felt trapped, like no matter what I chose, I was going to lose something important. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to let them push me around. I started researching my legal rights. I knew that as an adult, they couldn't just take my money without my consent. I also made sure to secure all my important documents, birth certificate, passport, bank information, in case things went south. I even started quietly packing some of my valuables and moving them to a friend's place, just in case I had to leave in a hurry. I knew I had to be prepared for the worst case scenario, being kicked out with nowhere to go. So, I reached out to my college's housing office to see if they had any emergency accommodations available. They didn't, but they pointed me towards some local resources that could help. It wasn't much, but it was something. When I finally confronted my parents, I was firm. I told them there was no way I was giving up my savings, and that if they really wanted to kick me out over this, I was ready to leave. My dad got furious, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. My mom started crying, saying she couldn't believe I was willing to tear this family apart over a little money. If it was really little money, why don't they pay for it then? Sarah, of course, threw a tantrum. She screamed about how I was ruining her life and how I didn't care about her happiness. My parents just stood there, glaring at me, waiting for me to back down. But I didn't. I told them that if they wanted me gone, I'd be out by the end of the week. The next few days were hell. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was only to throw more guilt my way. My mom started giving me the silent treatment, while my dad resorted to making snide comments every time I was in the room. Sarah refused to even look at me, as if I'd personally betrayed her. They kept up with the threats and emotional blackmail, trying to wear me down. Despite the hostile environment, I kept preparing to leave. I secretly moved the rest of my valuables to my friend's place and made arrangements to stay with them temporarily if needed. I also reached out to some other friends, letting them know what was going on. They offered their support and even suggested I look into legal action if things got worse. The breaking point came one morning when I found out that my parents had tried to access my bank account. They thought they could just take the money and deal with the fallout later. But I was one step ahead of them. I'd already emptied the account and closed it. When they realized what I'd done, They were livid. My dad yelled at me, calling me ungrateful and saying that I was destroying the family. My mom just cried and kept asking how I could do this to them. But I didn't back down. I told them that they'd crossed a line and that I was done being their scapegoat. If they wanted me out, I'd leave, but they weren't going to get a single cent of my money. I knew that leaving quietly would just let them spin the story however they wanted, so I decided to take control of the narrative. I posted a detailed account of what had happened on social media. I included everything: how they'd tried to force me to give up my savings, the threats, the emotional manipulation. I even posted screenshots of their texts and the bank alerts showing their attempts to access my account. To make sure the message got across, I tagged not just my parents and sister, but also some of their friends and extended family members. I wanted everyone to know the truth. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Most people were on my side, offering support and calling out my parents and sister for their behavior. Some of my extended family reached out, shocked and disappointed by what they'd learned. They'd had no idea things were this bad. A few people, mostly my parents' close friends, tried to defend them, but they were drowned out by the criticism. It didn't take long for word to spread. My parents' colleagues and friends started distancing themselves, and I heard that Sarah's plans for her new apartment fell through when the landlord got wind of what was happening. She was furious, blaming me for ruining her life, but I didn't care. They'd all brought this on themselves. The fallout was brutal for my parents. Their carefully curated image as the perfect family was shattered. My dad's work relationships became strained as his colleagues began to see him in a different light. My mom, who prided herself on her social standing, found herself being quietly excluded from her usual circles. And Sarah? She lost her chance at the apartment she wanted so badly, and no one was rushing to offer her another one. After the showdown, I moved in with a supportive friend. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than staying in that toxic environment. Adjusting to independence was tough, but it also felt freeing. I could finally focus on my studies and my future without constantly worrying about what my family would try to take from me next. My parents didn't take the fallout well. They flooded my phone with calls and messages, alternating between threats and desperate pleas for me to take down the post and come back home. They even tried to twist the narrative, claiming I'd overreacted and that they were just trying to help Sarah out of a tough situation. But by then, it was too late. Everyone knew the truth. I decided to maintain a strict no-contact stance. I blocked them on all platforms and made sure they couldn't reach me. I also sought legal advice about potentially getting a restraining order if they didn't back off. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I couldn't let them drag me down anymore. In the aftermath, a few estranged relatives reached out, offering their help and expressing regret for not getting involved sooner. My college even offered additional financial aid after hearing about my situation, which was a huge relief. Through all of this, I've grown a lot. I'm more confident and self-reliant than I ever was before. My academic performance has actually improved now that I'm not constantly stressed about my family. I've also made new friends and built a support network that I can actually rely on. Looking ahead, I'm focused on achieving complete financial independence. I'm also seriously considering cutting ties with my family for good. The cycle of toxicity has gone on long enough, and I'm committed to breaking it. It's not going to be easy, but I'm determined to build a better future for myself, one where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. So Reddit, Ida for refusing to give up my college savings to my sister and for going public with what my family tried to do to me? Update 1. It's been about 3 months since I posted my original story, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me get through some tough times. After I moved out and went public with what happened, things got pretty crazy. My parents and Sarah didn't take it well at all. They kept trying to contact me, switching between angry threats and guilt tripping. I stayed firm with my no contact rule, but it wasn't easy. About a week after I left, my mom showed up at my friend's place where I was staying. I have no idea how she found out where I was. She was crying and begging me to come home, saying they'd made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I almost felt bad for her, but then she started in on how I was tearing the family apart and how Sarah was suffering because of me. That's when I knew nothing had really changed. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She left, but not before saying I was breaking her heart. The next day, my dad called my college trying to get information about my classes and schedule. Luckily, I'd already talked to the administration about my situation, so they didn't give him anything. But it freaked me out that he was trying to track me down like that. Things escalated when Sarah started showing up at places she knew I frequented, the library, the coffee shop near campus, even outside some of my classes. She'd try to corner me, alternating between screaming at me for ruining her life and begging me to give her the money. It got so bad that I had to change my routines and ask friends to walk with me between classes. About a month after I left, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. She said she wanted to meet up and talk. I was hesitant, but she had always been kind to me, so I agreed to meet her in a public place. When I got there, I found out my parents had put her up to it and they were hiding at a nearby table, waiting for me. I felt so betrayed. I left immediately and blocked my aunt's number too. The social media fallout continued. My parents tried to do damage control by posting their own version of events, claiming I was a troubled kid who had stolen money from them and run away. Some people believed them, but most saw through it. It was hard seeing family, friends and distant relatives take sides, but I was grateful for those who stood by me. Sarah took it to another level. She started a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was a victim of financial abuse and needed help to escape a toxic family situation. She used my name in it, twisting the story to make it sound like I was the abuser. I had to get a lawyer involved to get the campaign taken down. Speaking of lawyers, my parents threatened legal action against me. They claimed I owed them money for raising me and that they had a right to my savings. It was ridiculous, but it scared me enough to seek legal advice. The lawyer assured me they had no case, but advised me to keep documenting everything just in case. About 2.5 months after I left, I got a surprising email from Jack, Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They'd broken up a few months before all this happened, and I'd always thought he was a decent guy who got sucked into my family's drama. He apologized for not reaching out sooner and said he wanted me to know he supported me. Jack told me some things about Sarah that shocked me. Apparently, she'd been cheating on him throughout their relationship, often with guys who could buy her expensive gifts or take her on trips. He said she was always talking about how she deserved a more luxurious lifestyle and how unfair it was that she had to work for anything. It made me see her behavior in a new light. I also found out from Jack that Sarah had been fired from her last job for stealing. My parents had covered it up, paying back what she took to keep the company from pressing charges. I was furious that they'd done that while expecting me to give up my hard-earned savings. About 3 months after I left, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be my grandfather, my dad's father. We'd never been close, he lived in another state and we only saw him every few years. He said he'd heard what happened from a cousin and wanted to hear my side of the story. I was cautious at first after what happened with the aunt I trusted, but as we talked, I realized he was genuinely concerned. He told me that he'd had his own issues with my dad over the years and that he wasn't surprised by what had happened. He apologized for not being more present in my life and offered to help me out financially if I needed it. I was touched by his offer, but I told him I wanted to make it on my own. He respected that, but said the offer would stand if I ever changed my mind. It meant a lot to know that I had some family on my side. The conversation with my grandfather made me curious about other family members I'd lost touch with. I reached out to a couple of cousins on my mom's side who had always gotten along with. One of them, Megan, told me she'd had her own issues with my parents and Sarah over the years. Megan told me something that made me extremely angry as I didn't know about it while living with them. A few years ago, she'd been going through a tough divorce and needed a place to stay for a few weeks. My parents had initially offered to let her stay with them, but then Sarah complained that she didn't want Megan invading her space. My parents kicked Megan out after just 3 days, leaving her to sleep on friends' couches until she could find an apartment. I couldn't believe they'd do that to family while demanding I give up everything for Sarah. As all this was happening, I was still trying to figure out my living situation. My friends' parents were kind enough to let me stay with them, but I knew it couldn't be a long-term solution. I started looking for a cheap apartment near campus, but everything was out of my price range. A few days later, I ran into one of Sarah's friends at the grocery store. She tried to guilt trip me, saying Sarah was depressed and it was all my fault. I asked her if Sarah had told her the whole story. She admitted she only knew Sarah's version. I gave her my side of things, and I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. She left looking confused, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The next day, I got a call from the bank. Someone had tried to access my new account using my social security number. The bank had flagged it as suspicious activity and blocked it. I knew immediately it had to be my parents. I filed a police report and started the process of putting a freeze on my credit. I was shaken by how far they were willing to go. I decided it was time to take more serious action. I went back to the lawyer I'd consulted earlier and started the process of getting a restraining order against my parents and Sarah. It was a drastic step, but I felt like I had no choice. The day before the hearing for the restraining order, I got a frantic call from my mom. She was crying, saying she'd heard about the hearing and begging me not to go through with it. She said it would destroy the family and ruin their lives. I told her they should have thought of that before they tried to steal from me and harass me and hung up. The hearing itself was intense. My parents and Sarah showed up with a lawyer of their own. They tried to paint me as an ungrateful, troubled kid who was lashing out at his loving family. But I had evidence, the texts, the emails, the social media posts, the bank records. The judge saw through their act and granted the restraining order. After the hearing, as I was leaving the courthouse, Sarah tried to approach me one last time. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping. She started to say something about how sorry she was, but then her face twisted and she spat out, "I hope you're happy now that you've ruined all our lives." A bailiff stepped in and led her away. It was the last time I saw her. I've also started looking for a part-time job to help cover my living expenses. It's tough balancing work and school, but it feels good to be fully independent. I'm determined to make it on my own. I'm not going to lie, it's been a tough few months. There are days when I miss having a family, even if it was a dysfunctional one. Holidays are especially hard. So, that's where things stand now. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I'm moving forward. Final update. It's been about a year since my last update, and I can't believe how much has changed. I want to thank everyone for their continued support throughout this journey. Your encouragement has meant more than you know. After the restraining order hearing, things were quiet for a while. I thought maybe my family had finally gotten the message. But you know what they say about the calm before the storm. About 3 months ago, I got an unexpected call from my uncle, my dad's brother. We'd never been close, but he sounded genuinely concerned. He told me that things had spiraled out of control with my parents and Sarah. Apparently, Sarah had gotten involved with some shady people and owed them a lot of money. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, had taken out a second mortgage on the house to try to pay off her debts. But it wasn't enough. One night, these people Sarah owed money to showed up at my parents' house. Things got ugly. My uncle didn't have all the details, but he said the police were involved and my dad ended up in the hospital with a broken arm. Here's where it gets really messed up. My parents, despite everything, are still trying to protect Sarah. They told the police it was just a random break-in. But word got out in the family about what really happened. A few days after my uncle's call, I started getting messages from my parents again. I unblocked them as they are still my parents. Big mistake. They were begging me to come home, saying they needed my help. They even tried to guilt me by saying that if I'd just given them the money when they asked, none of this would have happened. Can you believe it? They're still trying to make this my fault somehow. I ignored their messages. I've also managed to save up enough to move out of my friend's house into a better apartment in a more secure building. It's a bit further from campus, but worth it for the peace of mind. But then Sarah showed up at my apartment, ignoring the restraining order. I have no idea how she found out where I live as I had moved there recently. She was a mess, crying, begging for money, saying she was in danger. I told her to leave or I'd call the cops. She screamed that I was killing her and that if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. It was awful. I called my lawyer right after that and we're in the process of extending the restraining order to include my current address. I've also had to inform my landlord and neighbors about the situation, just in case Sarah or my parents try anything. On top of all this drama, I found out through the other family members that my parents have been telling everyone that I'm the one who got Sarah into trouble. They're claiming I introduced her to these shady people and that I owe them money too. It's complete nonsense, but some relatives are believing it. I've had to block a bunch of people on social media because of the hateful messages I was getting. I've also made some great friends over the past year. They've become like a chosen family to me. We're even planning a celebration together. As for the latest updates with my parents and Sarah, I've heard through the grapevine that they're facing foreclosure on the house. Part of me feels bad for them, but a bigger part knows that they brought this on themselves. I can't help but think about how different things could have been if they just respected my boundaries and treated me fairly. So that's where things stand now. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. I couldn't have done it without you.